Hey guys, welcome to Create a Place podcast. This episode was recorded live at NeoCon Design Days in Chicago. This conversation with Ryan Anderson, VP Insights with MillerKnoll, was a lot of fun right in the middle of their showroom at Fulton Market. We're going to dive right in, so get ready to listen, and I hope you enjoy.
I lead research, and we call them our planning services. Basically, it's like we offer workplace strategy and design ideas, but we don't charge for it because we want to be partners with the A&D community. But I've got a great team of researchers, workplace strategists and designers out there looking at how our physical spaces can be made better to make our lives better. And then we try to provide that insight to the people we work with on actual projects.
I love that. So were you part of Miller or Knoll?
I joined Herm Miller in 2012.
Okay.
And I eventually became the leader of research there. And the history of research at Herm Miller goes way back to the 60s.
I'm a huge nerd about it. I've been to the vault twice.
Have you?
Yes, I have.
We just redid all of our archives experience. In fact, it was featured on CBS Saturday Morning last week. And so
I saw that.
that research goes way back. And then when we kind of joined forces with Knoll and created this whole collective of brands, we kind of took stewardship of all of that historical research and began working across all of our brands to inform product development. That included for us expanding into residential research and other domains that I hadn't done at really very much of at Herm Miller. So it's been fun.
That's awesome. I mean, both collections in themselves are amazing, but to be able to have all of that now under one roof, that's really impressive. And it's got to be a lot of fun,
It's
to
so
dive
much
back
fun.
into that.
I mean, I'm surrounded by these amazing designers who are always looking for new ideas. So yes, it's Knoll and Herm Miller, but it's also brands like Muto and Hay and Not One, or our textiles group. And for me, I've been in this industry. This is like my 31st year. To be able to do new things and engage in new ways, that's a gift.
Yeah, it is.
You don't want to get stale.
Exactly. It's probably why I'm doing this now. I've been in the industry for 30 years. And so last year I said, we need a little boost in our media for our firm, Crate & Co. And we do a great job. We've been in workplace forever. And we've done brands like Sam's Club and Walmart, corporate headquarters. And that's where I fell in love with Miller in the first place, as we were working with Sam's Club back in 2009.
Oh, wow.
And we did their corporate headquarters, the very first one they ever had when they came out of the buildings of the conglomerate of Walmart and Sam's. And Sam's wanted to brand themselves individually. And so we headed up the design for that. And we got to go to Miller, and I just fell in love with the research as a young designer. That was incredible for me.
It is fun. I'm glad we got to help you play a little role in helping to establish their identity.
Yeah, absolutely. They standardize on Miller. So
Thank you.
my studio, in fact, and we did crazy things with it that we weren't supposed to do, and they loved it.
We kind of welcome the crazy.
Yeah,
That's
it
where
was
this
fun.
inventiveness comes from. In fact, if you look at the history of a lot of our products, but in particular, some of the landmark pieces from Miller, the Shell chair, the Aeron chair, they were viewed as kind of crazy. Like there was a strangeness to a lot of some of the things, molded plywood, molded fiberglass, but we welcome that creative kind of exploration. So bring on the crazy.
Exactly. And there's got to be a certain amount of delusion, I think, being creative and thinking like, this is going to be awesome. I'll be delusional until it comes true.
Yeah, you can always scale back to reality later, right?
Exactly. But thank you for joining me today. We're here at NeoCon, and I'm excited to have some of these conversations in the spaces. And I want to just cover a few things, as we'll make it kind of a brief episode. But first of all, we were at Cornet last fall. That was when I launched the podcast. I sat in a talk with you about relationship with furniture and space. And I've been waiting all these months to talk to you because I wanted to dive a little deeper into that, because I couldn't agree more. It was like a 10-minute talk, it felt like, and then you were out. And I thought, wait a minute, we got to unpack a little bit more of this. So I want to do a little bit of that. And then I want to touch on that article that you just wrote about AI, because that's a huge topic, and it's very top of mind to everyone, especially designers. And as we're trying to navigate, how do we make more time for creativity and not give it all away to AI? Maybe just recap a little bit about that talk, and then kind of how you've been thinking about it ever since then, how that's evolving.
Yeah. I mean, the talk, you're right. It was short and sweet. Always leave them wanting more.
Exactly.
It was basically an appeal for us to not just think in terms of activity-based work, like how our workplaces support activities. That's still important, but most of the activities that could only happen in the office in the past can happen almost anywhere,
Right.
including places that we can personalize, like our homes. So to try to suggest that the office is going to be better for each person at supporting key activities is a tough stretch. But the one thing that we know from our research, and we've been neck deep in this for years now, that people want more of from their spaces is better interactions with other people. And so we've been looking at it through the lens of relationship-based work, kind of a complement to activity-based work, and actually using frameworks from social sciences. And I think I touched upon some of them briefly, and I won't unpack all of them right now, but frameworks like strong and weak ties from the world of sociology or place attachment from the world of environmental psychology to say, let's not just say the workplace is collaborative, it builds culture. Let's actually see how the design of specific types of spaces and the use of our furnishings, our textiles, can produce better interactions between people. And in doing so, kind of re-spark a connection, a place attachment. Sometimes we say it's not return to office, it's reattach to office.
I like that term.
Well, I think it's legit because you can return, but if you don't feel any sort of connection with other people or a connection with the space, your motivation to come back is pretty low. And I think there's a vicious cycle going on in a lot of organizations right now where people show up and there's not much there. Like for them, it feels a little bit lifeless or a little bit stale, and
especially
they're less
coming from their home or their
Exactly.
coffee shop or wherever they've been working for the past few years, right?
Totally. So yeah, that's what that talk was about. I'll bridge right into the world of AI. I mean, we've been looking at technology for a really long time. I used to be VP of Digital Innovation at Herman Miller, working with AI tools. And so the way we think about this is, if deployed strategically, and that, I got to say, that's a big if, AI should be able to take the worst of our work, the most technical, roads demanding, the parts that we don't like, and free us from it. And the big question for any organizational leader, including principals of design firms, commercial real estate firms, whatever, is how are we going to reinvest that time? So for an architecture and design practice where billable hours are so demanding and everybody's under such pressure, getting a little bit of that time back and being intentional about saying, can we use some of it for some mentoring? Can we use some of it to be able to spark a little bit of cross-pollination between the studios, whatever, is an intentional way of leveraging AI to make a long-term difference in the firm. But if we don't think of it that way, we're just going to end up piling more work on people. And that's what technology in the workplace has been doing. We need to be more strategic and find ways of prioritizing the human connection, the relationships, the things that we know people are missing, because there's also a really substantial body of research indicating that right now, particularly in the US, workers are burned out, they're lonely, they're socially isolated, they're disconnected. The technological interactions are higher, the interpersonal connections lower. So as leaders, we got to be intentional about solving that. There's this movement over the last 30 years or so called the consumerization of IT, which is enterprise technology kind of has faded, and all these consumer technologies are what really help us to work in new ways. And we typically learn new technologies by playing with them. I know this sounds like a weird place to start, but any leader should be able to take a look at the work processes of their group and say, which part of this do we want the least? What part do we want to cut out of the work process? And then identify tools you can play with. And it's a pretty common mistake to say, okay, I found this tool. This is the new thing. Everybody start using it, only to realize, oh, that wasn't exactly what we wanted. Or two of our users are like pros at it and two of them are scared to use it. So the smart move is actually to say, all right, everyone, we're going to try to take this part of our work process. Maybe it's something related to specification or design development or whatever, and say, let's see what tools out there help us be freed the most and institute a time of play. In fact, years ago, when Herman Miller released Microsoft Teams internally, we had done some research with the head of user experience at Teams. And I remember putting time on my team member's calendar. It was several hours, and it just said, play with Microsoft Teams. I had created a fake team called Blackbriar because I love the Jason Bourne series.
Okay.
And a few of my power users were like, Ryan, I've been in there for 20 minutes. I get it. I did a GIF. I created a document. Can I be done? Yeah, of course you can. But others took time to really figure it out. And then when we started to use it for a project, it was a little bit less scary. I even remember the first time I used Miro, I jumped into a board that somebody else had created, and I was like, ooh, I don't want to touch this because I'm going to screw it up. So yeah, the strategy here is figure out what part of your work process you don't love, find tools to play with, then scale the deployment of it, finally reinvest the time in more meaningful things.
Yeah. And I think that's the message for everybody just to think about. It's tough to invest time in something and not know if it's going to work or not. And it may just be a committee or just a handful of people, right, that are actually focusing on that. And particularly if you're talking about a small firm, like, well, let's not go into the deep end quite yet.
No.
Until we figure out what's going to work. And I find that there's a level of frustration that happens, right? And so the next thing that you try becomes a little bit harder
Yeah,
to
that's true.
adopt because now you're kind of jaded. And I think that's just the reality.
It is. And I love your suggestion of having a group, because if it's a group that knows how this process should work, they can check the quality. Anytime we think AI, we should think it's like having 1,000 interns, particularly generative AI. The working power is amazing, but you can't necessarily trust the results. A lot of people probably haven't heard the term AI hallucination. A hallucination is when AI gives you an answer that it thinks you want, but it's actually straight up wrong. And it's not programmed to say, I'm not sure. ChatGPT, Gemini, other tools like that will give you an answer because it's what it thinks you want. And sometimes it's just not trustworthy. And so, yeah, we're playing with it for adoption. But if that group also knows what the output should be, they can take a look and be like, that's not going to work for us. But we're really fortunate at MillerKnoll because one of the people who leads AI at Microsoft, John Maeda, is on our board. So not only have we been piloting and trying things for a really long time. I remember first using AI to help pay our bills maybe 2017, but we've got really sound voices that can help us make good choices. For those of us in this profession of making physical places, though, I do think we should connect it back with how can our physical spaces counterbalance the negative effects of technology? And if AI is going to save us some time, let's reinvest it in those meaningful in-person experiences. And I hope the world finds that to be the case.
Agreed. Yeah, that's really good advice. So what do you think about the show this year?
I mean, I think it's awesome. So over here in Fulton Market, we call it Design Days. And for us, we've got 2 buildings expressing all of our different brands, as well as the power of what it looks like to plan with MillerKnoll as a collective. I've mostly been stationed on our second floor, which is a space designed using our research for our own employees, using the breadth of this full portfolio. So for me, this is my 31st. It's probably my favorite.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah.
That's good to know.
It's just very rewarding to see all of this come together. And anytime you put a large group of companies together, particularly companies that used to compete with each other, it takes a while to find each brand's unique role. And right now, in the building next to where we are, seeing Hey and Muto across the hall from each other is such a cool expression of what makes these 2 Copenhagen-based brands different, but also so special. Brands like Not One, Colbert Boston Sanders, who does our work tools, like it's all here, and it's in a very authentic way. So yeah, it's my favorite so far. And I get to hang out with people like you in podcasts.
And this is fun. So I'm asking everybody 2 questions. What keeps you up at night right now? And what lights you up? So what gives you inspiration these days?
Oh, that's a great question. I think probably the topic that I wrestle with, both in the context of our research and helping organizations, but very much for me as a leader, is just the very, very distributed nature of our work. So I've got 28 team members in 22 cities. That's not unusual these days. I mean, that's the bigger topic of what's going on. Distributed work, the hybrid remote thing is secondary. When you've got that many people in that many locations, whether they happen to be in an office or home on a given day is secondary. The primary challenge is getting a group to operate in a cohesive way, to feel a sense of belonging, to not be stepping on each other's toes. It takes an incredible amount of intentionality. And I've had distributed teams for a long time, but not this many people in this many spaces. So I have to manage through it every single day, make sure everybody feels connected, make sure that we're not duplicative in how we're doing different types of work, and then turn around and try to help organizations. And I find that organizations that are co-located and regional or smaller are having a much easier time with their spaces than these huge organizations that are spread out.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think it's like the key thing we're going to be wrestling with for a long time. What gives me inspiration? That's a really easy one for me because, as I said, I've been in this over 30 years, trying to elevate the value of place design, but in particular workplace. I've never had the kind of conversations with CEOs, CFOs, CHROs in my career that I've had in the last year. The challenge of this major kind of market correction, because I don't think the office was headed in the right direction pre-pandemic. Now the executives are saying, help me understand the value of this and what we can do with it.
Yes.
It feels like I've been waiting for that for decades. And so
I've been waiting for you to ask me that.
Yeah, exactly. I've been right here. Thank you. And so it is overwhelming, the sheer number of organizations that my team and our other colleagues get to work with. But like I said, this is to me way more interesting, way more promising than the conversations that we were having in 2018, 2019. And I'm optimistic that we'll end up seeing spaces that might be a little bit smaller, or more distributed, but much better and much more user-centered with relationships rather than just activities in mind.
Yeah, I love that. It does have to go beyond the activity base, right? It has to be about who we're working
It's
with
the
to
who.
get that done.
Exactly.
It's the who.
It's those
And,
moments
you
of
know,
joy where like you see somebody hug or like, how you been? Or you get a chance to sit over lunch and say, hey, I've been thinking about this thing we're doing. I'm not so sure about this. Like you just don't really find those moments on video.
Yeah. Well, and to your point, though, it's the intentionality. That's the biggest thing that I think everyone struggles with. It's when you don't know what to do. RTO mandates.
Yes.
Do you have a comment on that one?
Yeah. I mean, forceful mandates that cause people a loss of sense of freedom result in negative consequences. There's a theory in the world of psychology called reactance theory, which has described this for years, which is if you tell somebody to do something, they view it as loss of autonomy, they're going to do the opposite. And so that's why we talk about reattach to office. It's about nurturing like this greater sense of connectedness. It takes some time, but it can be done very effectively. Communication and engagement's a huge part of it. So those organizations that are like, I don't want to talk to our folks about it, just send an email, make sure they do it. It's setting them up for failure. The physical environment becomes this rope in a tug of war between executives and workers when that happens. For each of those, I've seen more examples in recent like months and even years of organizations being much more intentional about it. We covered some of them on our podcast. As an example, Lego did a really great job of saying to their employees, hey, we want to honor that you need a little bit better work-life balance and more freedom, but we're not freelancers. Like we have an obligation to our team members. There's people whose voices aren't being heard. There's people who aren't learning. They kept management out of the conversation. This was not about productivity. This was about our social obligation in a good way to each other.
Yeah.
And it was very effective. And so there's more and more of those. For every headline you see around this company decided to tell everybody, get your butt in your seat, I get a chance to see a lot of other better examples.
Well, that makes me feel better because we see that too. There's definitely a mix of that. And that's just something that we're going to have to keep coaching executives and leadership on. That communication piece is super important. Understanding who your people are, where they're coming from, understanding the diversity of all the things and what that looks like, and understanding who's in the spaces and
Yes.
what their relationship is to each other, right? Just to kind of bring that full circle.
Probably the missing link for me in most of these situations is, did somebody really clearly articulate the intent? And is the intent good? And I'm also talking about the actual intent of the design of the space.
Right.
And so if a really talented design practitioner gets a chance to try to understand their client a little bit, comes up with a design, too often the employees don't get to hear, this is what we heard. These are the problems we think we're solving. This is our intent. We hope that this space does this. It might not be perfect, but this is our hope for you. That builds that trust. Like, okay, I get it. That's cool. I see what's going on here. And then saying to someone, we'd like you to spend more time there. Like, we've made this investment to try to help you, is a way easier thing than whatever you're doing at home. We'd prefer you do it over there. Yeah, we know it's less convenient. It takes more time, but we don't trust you to do it at home, or we just arbitrarily think you should do it in the office. That's not the winning recipe.
Yeah, it's not. And you made a really good point, and it's something that we've talked about for a long time. We do this beautiful design for an office. It's performative. It's what they asked for. It might look different. And so we've always said, let us come back in and let us talk, because we've done all the programming. We sat in the spaces with these folks for months. We've figured out how they tick and what they need. But then they go in this new space. Nobody talks to them about it. Nobody gives them the vocabulary to say, this is how we use this environment.
Yep.
This is when, these are the scenarios. Also, we heard what you said. We know what you need. This is how we articulated it for you. And it looks different, right?
Yeah.
It looks different than what you thought you needed, but it also checked these 5 boxes. And the light bulb goes on, and it's amazing how they can connect a lot better to that space, because now they understand why. Isn't that what it comes down to at the end of the day? It's the why.
Yes.
Why are we doing it? What's the purpose? And who are we?
Who it's for, because
Right.
let's face it, for a really long time, like more than 100 years, the design of offices was primarily driven by the leaders, like what they wanted, their status, how they wanted to express.
Yeah.
Even for the employees, just to hear, no, that space is for you. You can use it. That's okay, is incredibly valuable. I think it
Yeah.
increases adoption. It increases the utilization rates of the space.
And seeing leadership use it too.
That's
And
even
not,
better.
We
Yeah.
let them get in there.
Yeah, I'll say we do a 90-minute free change readiness workshop, primarily to help bridge some of these things. And often it gives us a chance to celebrate what the design team is doing, but also to help, if I just put it really bluntly, facilities and other folks that might not always be used to having some sort of communication plan. Think through the basics. They can lean on their own employee communications team to make it happen, but they need to understand what story they're telling.
Yes.
And when done effectively, I think it's half the battle.
I totally agree. That was awesome. Well, thank you so much for chatting with me. This is a great location and everybody's just been swirling around us. So I love the energy of it all. I really appreciate you taking the time to talk with me today.
I'm glad we finally got to follow up after Cornet. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, me too.
Hey friends, if you enjoyed today's episode, please join in the conversation at Create a Place Podcast on LinkedIn or Instagram. And don't forget to subscribe. We're so glad you tuned in to Create a Place and look forward to seeing you next time.